So this is pretty involved, what we are going to be doing today. So let us move a bit swiftly. So what we're going to be looking at is project schedule management. The learning objectives are many, but the key ones will see us swiftly going through the 6 time management processes. We are going to learn how to sequence activities, how to calculate 3-point estimates, how to identify the critical path of a project, and we will give an interpretation of what a critical path is and how to develop a project schedule. All of this you will need for your assignment number 2. You need to have this understanding. So basically, we just look at the bigger picture. So we have, for example, a scheduling method. So we'll go through a scheduling method. There are a number of scheduling methods that we could use, but we are going to be looking at the CPM, which is the critical path method. We are going to be looking at scheduling tools. When we utilize the scheduling tools, we can develop a model provided we have sufficient project information. And when we speak of project information, we're talking about data that is obtained from, let's say, the WBS, like you would have gone through the WBS last class, the various activities that will emerge from your WBS, the activities that will be contained in the work packages, the various resources that are required, the duration of each resource, and bearing in mind that we will make these determinations at the WBS dictionary level or in the WBS dictionary. What are their dependencies, whether or not we have constraints, what are the various calendars that we will generate to include resource calendars, milestones, leads, lags, etc. So that is the vast amount of information that we will need to input into scheduling model, and of course our output will be our project schedule. But you're already familiar with the various processes and how we apply the characteristics of the various processes to include the inputs, the tools and techniques, and what the outputs are, bearing in mind that all of this is influenced by our EEF, Enterprise Environmental Factors, and our OPA, which is our Organizational Process Assets. So that is what this slide is sharing with us. But the question that we need to ask is, what truly is a project schedule? And what this is, just as I would have described on the slide before, it includes the processes required to manage the timely completion of the project. Now, these are the 6 processes that we are going to be going through. These are the processes that are contained in your textbook. Minding persons, the textbook, well, textbooks are uploaded on Moodle, and I'm mainly using the PMBOK and the Larson and Gray. Now, the plan schedule management is the first process, and really this is about establishing the policies, the procedures, and the documentation that will aid our planning, the development, management, execution, and how we control the project schedule. So that is what project management and plan schedule management is about. The key benefit of this project is that it provides guidance and direction on how the project schedule will be managed throughout the project. Let us quickly look at our usual diagram. So the inputs, we have the project charter. We need some amount of expert judgment and data analysis, and the output is our schedule management plan. Now, the second process is the defined activities, and as I said, I'm going to be going through these pretty quickly because they are the core of this particular process group is what we want to get to. 6.2, define activities. Remember when we did the WBS process, we created work packages. In those work packages, we had activities. So we did say that one activity could form a work package. Well, we are going to define those activities now. So basically, it creates a list. What this process is about, it's about the creation of a list of scheduled activities. And this is called the activity list that will be used to create the schedule. But pretty much we had this already from our WBS, right? So it's a process of identifying and documenting the specific actions to be performed to produce the project deliverables. So work packages are typically decomposed into smaller components called activities, but we know this already from the WBS process. Now, what truly is an activity? So we can determine what an activity is because essentially it's an element of work. It will have an expected duration. It will have a cost. It will have resources assigned to it, and it connects to other scheduled activities or scheduled milestones via logical relationships. So an activity must fulfill this particular criteria. Now the process, so we have our schedule management plan and our scope baseline as inputs, and through the process of decomposition and rolling wave planning, we will define in a short while what is rolling wave planning. Through rolling wave planning, we get an activity list, activity attributes, and milestones. These are our key outputs. Now what is rolling wave planning? This mainly is an iterative planning technique in which the work to be accomplished in the near term is planned in detail because we have sufficient information to plan it, while work that is further down the road into the future is planned at a higher level. Now, it is a form of progressive elaboration applicable to work packages, planning packages, and release planning when using an agile or waterfall approach. Now, I want you to please read up what agile means, what the waterfall approach is. The text gives just a paragraph each. So when we talk about rolling wave planning, the work can exist at various levels of detail depending on where we are in the project life cycle, right? So activity lists will contain all the scheduled activities that are planned to be performed. It includes only those activities required. It describes each activity, and it has to be organized as an extension of the WBS in Microsoft projects or whichever project management software that we're using. In addition to the activity list, there's what is referred to as the activity attributes, right? The activity attribute includes codes, and we went through this before. The codes help us to identify the particular activity. That's the numbering system that we use. There are predecessor activities. There are successor activities that are attributes to any individual activity. Then there are logical relationships, there are leads, there are lags, there are resource requirements, there are dates that may be imposed, which in itself is a constraint, and then there are assumptions. So for every activity, this is the type of relationship or that we need to have, or the attributes, if you may, that are associated with each activity. Now, then we make mention of milestone. What is a milestone? It is used to identify significant events in the project. There are important reasons to identify and use milestone. So when we're reporting progress, we use our milestone as markers. When a deliverable is expected to be completed, we use a milestone to help us to gauge that. And a very important reason why we use milestone is to assist our finance/accounting department to track the progress of payment. Now, when we input a milestone, in a project management software for control and monitoring process purposes, a milestone normally has 0 duration. So the moment you see any activity that has a 0 duration, you know that that particular activity or series of activities culminate in a deliverable, and that's why it has 0 duration. There is also what is referred to as a milestone chart. So just assume that we are having this particular project that starts from January of this year straight through to July of next year. We can put significant markers. For example, the milestone chart will focus on the planned significant event that is scheduled to occur at specific times over this 18-month period. So the start date is a milestone. Say, okay, we'll start at X date. By the end of February, we must complete data analysis. By the end of March, we must complete needs analysis. By the end of May, we would have done all the work necessary to ensure that the prototype A trials is complete. But we're going to do a prototype B trial as well. By the end of August, that must be complete. By the end of December, we have another milestone. We should have done all the works necessary to complete the customer analysis and to obtain feedback. And certainly by the end of July, or whatever date it is in July of the following year, we have that as our final launch date. So that's a milestone. And on our milestone chart, all the works necessary to be completed prior to the final launch date must have been completed for us to realize this particular milestone. So it is always good to have a milestone chart for each project so that you can track the progress, okay? Now let's move to 6.3, sequencing of activities. Now this is a process of identifying and documenting relationships among project activities, all right? So what it does, it orders the activity list and creates the project network diagram, which shows the order in which activities must be performed. So we will look at a network diagram in a short while. A network diagram, please note, is a requirement for your assignment number 2. So please pay particular attention as we go through in showing how we generate a network diagram. So let's look at our graphic here. The inputs into the sequencing of activities obviously will include a project management plan with a number of project documents to include your activity list and your activity attributes. The tools and techniques. Remember I mentioned just now about the network diagram. We are going to use a technique referred to as the precedence diagramming method, or PDM. This is the method that is used to generate a network diagram. I'm going to be showing you all of this in a short while. We need to be conscious of the dependencies of one activity over another. So we use a technique known as dependency determination. There are leads and lags. I'm going to explain to you in a short while what leads and lags are, but I would expect that you will use your textbook as supplement to strengthen that which I am imparting to you today. But nonetheless, we have definitions for all of these, and I will give you live examples so you can better appreciate what each of these are. Then obviously, the output for this process is your project schedule network diagram. That's your main output. And we're going to show you how to do that. So let us start by looking at PDM, which is the precedence diagramming method. And really what this is a technique that is used in project management to construct a schedule module in which activities are presented on nodes and are graphically linked by one or more logical relationships to show the sequence in which the activities are to be performed. I did allude to that before, and when I show you the network diagram, you will have a better appreciation as to what the precedence diagramming method is all about. We spoke earlier about dependencies. we need to recognize that there are four main types of dependencies when we speak of dependencies in project management. There's the mandatory dependency that are legally and contractually required, or they are inherent in the nature of work, means you must do them to accomplish your objectives. There are discretionary dependencies, and these are sometimes referred to as preferred logic or preferential logic, or in some texts you'll see them referred to as soft logic. These are established based on knowledge of best practices or desire. Then there is the external dependency, and it involves a relationship between project activities and non-project activities, and are usually outside the project team's control. You don't control them. Then there are the internal dependencies that involve a precedence relationship between project activities. Now, let us look at this graphic that outlines the different types of relationships when we speak to precedence diagramming. So we have what is called finish to start relationship, and I'm going to give you examples of these. So an activity, right, an activity A must be finished before an activity B can start. So that's a finish to start. An example, if you are doing a building construction, you must do the foundation and to complete the foundation before you can erect the superstructure, which is your walls. Let's say you're using blocks to construct this building. You must do the foundation, dig out an excavation, or do the excavation. You have to put in your steel work. You have to put in piping. If piping is going into the foundation, etc. And then you pour concrete and you bring to the desired level. Unless you do that, you cannot erect the superstructure. Then the second one, so that's your finish to start. Then we have start to start. The activity A must start before activity B can start, right? An example on a project, you could be in the process of starting the let me see that I'm looking for a simple example. Let's say that you are on a site, right? And you are going to use equipment. Let's say you're going to use a backhoe to do an excavation. There are a number of processes that you have to go through with the backhoe. The backhoe must, the engine of the backhoe must be running, and it must be fully functional before you can actually start the excavation. So the backhoe must be started and operational for the excavation to start. So that's a start to start in the simplest form. Then there is a finish to finish. So let's say activity A cannot be finished unless activity B is finished. So let's say you are doing a typical project and you're going through a procurement process. A part of the procurement process is that there's a defects liability period after the project has been done. Let's say it's a construction project. The defects liability period is 6 months, and the procurement would have withheld, say, 5% of the total project cost from the contractor to cover any defects that may come up during the defects liability period. So therefore, procurement is not closed out. So you cannot close out the project until procurement is closed out. So activity B cannot be finished until, so activity B might be project closeout, activity A is procurement. Until procurement is closed out, the project cannot be closed out. That's an example. Then we have a start to finish relationship. So activity A cannot cannot finish until activity B is finished, or vice versa. So this is a start to finish. As an example is this: if you are running a project and it's a site where you have to provide security, 24-hour security. The security that works the night shift cannot complete his duty unless the relief for the day shift arrives, right? So the day shift person must start his duty before the night shift person can finish. So that's a classic start to finish relationship. We spoke earlier about leads and lags, right? What are these? A lead is the amount of time a successor activity can start before a predecessor activity is completed. Okay? And a lag is the amount of time a successor activity will be delayed with respect to a predecessor activity. So you could be doing a project that has a multiplicity of activities that's taking place at the same time, and that a particular activity may have a lead of, let's say, 2 weeks. It means that you could actually delay that activity without running into any problems with your project before actually starting it. So you could delay it for 2 weeks before starting it because it has a lead. If it has a lag, that means it's running behind the 2 weeks. So you don't want lags. You consistently want to have leads on the activities on your project. Okay? Now, we spoke earlier about the project schedule network diagram. What this is a representation of the logical relationships or dependencies among the project schedule activities. So let's look at activity A, right? So for activity A, not activity A, activity 1 and activity 2. They are starting at the same time. If you notice, both of them are starting at the same time. Oh. Activity 2 cannot be finished until activity, though they start together. Activity 2 cannot finish unless activity 1 is finished. But let's look at activity. Activity 3 is a finish start relationship. That means activity 3 cannot start unless activity 1 is complete. Let's look at activity 4. In finished, it cannot start until activity 2 is finished. And activity 2 cannot be finished until activity 1 is finished. So we're looking at relationships here. Now there's a relationship between activity 4 and activity 5. Finish relationship. So activity 5 cannot 4 is start, which is very obvious. Let's look at 7. For activity 7, it's a start relationship. It cannot be finished until
I said the shoe about something wrong with my account. I'm not here.
Like more have
What's something
problem.
wrong with me? But
I
just that
know
one there, what's something wrong with me, dog?
you know they know man.
Yeah,
Uh,
in con
Like, I want to start cutting.
in connection.
uh,
I wonder if he knows.
It looked like your internet dropped in the middle of class or some.
All right, are you hearing me now? Hello,
Yes, sir.
morning again.
yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right, but I'm trying to. Okay. Your text makes mention of two types of relationship on a network diagram. There is the first that is called the activity on node, and then there's the activity on arrow. So please pay particular attention because you can see a multiple choice question that asks you. So let's say in this case, are you seeing the screen? Everybody seeing the screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right, so this is a network diagram, and these letters represent our description for activities. So activity A, activity B, activity C, activity G, etc. Right? You start the project here. Three activities A, D, and F. They have interdependencies are observed. They may not necessarily have begun together and at all in a straight line. So a little bit before, and A started a little bit before. Right? This as well could.
Sir, you're
So we have these arrows.
You catch him in a recording. I study my book. Oh, look more.
Oh, for the same too. Yes, I appreciate this quite short.
Remember say session still a record. But him not there. So I wonder how that.
Look like an internet a game problem more for him there.
All right, I'm going to try again. Are you hearing me?
Yes, sir.
All right. So I was explaining. So on the end of each arrow, as I said, we have our node, right? And
Gone again.
Jano.
work All right. If you are hearing me, I'm not sure what is happening here because I have two computers open and one is saying that it has internet and the one I'm using to deliver is consistently telling me that I have no internet. So I am not sure what is happening here. But if it continues, I'm going to suggest that we continue this lecture. But do recall that at 9:45 you have a test. So you will just go on, just in the event I get cut off and can't communicate with you in a further. So in 45 minutes, you have a test and you will just need to go on and apply the knowledge you have learned. Nonetheless, I will try to continue with this lecture. Hopefully, it will allow me to. So we spoke of an estimate, right? And we sometimes use the term loosely without having a very good understanding as to what an estimate is. We need to recognize that whilst an estimate is a quantitative assessment of the likely amount of outcome, an estimate can appear or is categorized or classified in different classes. So we have class 1 estimate all the way up to class 5 estimate. Ordinarily, what we have at best when we talk about estimates, unless we are experts in the field, is a class 3 estimate, where there isn't a great deal of accuracy with it. In fact, the maturity level of project definition of the deliverable at that time may not be no more than 40%. Okay, so that's why it's an estimate. The inputs into the estimate activity duration, the inputs are many, but it's mainly the project management plan and other associated project documents. You are expected to know the different types of estimating techniques that are used when we estimate activity durations. We start with our expert judgment, but then there is analogous estimating, there is parametric estimating, there is 3-point estimating, and there is bottom-up estimating. We're going to briefly go through these so that we have an appreciation as to what these represent. The output of the estimate activity. Go ahead, Jimmy.
Sir, not to interrupt your class because I don't know when your net will drop again. But I want to ask what provisions are made for those who cannot access Moodle for the test.
I am not aware that there needs to be any provision. Why wouldn't they be able to access Moodle?
For one reason or sir.
But anybody who is accessing this session should be able to access the test.
Well, not everybody in the class is in the session right now, sir.
Sorry?
Not everyone who is in the class is in the session right now.
Well, I wouldn't know why. I don't know why they wouldn't. Nobody has communicated to me that having an issue with accessing the class. Nobody has communicated that at no time. So this would be the first. You are saying that and you are online, so that would mean if there's someone in the class who cannot access the class and I'm being told at the 13th hour, that person is not serious. All right? So as far as I'm aware, there is no one who can't access the class.
All right, sir.
So let us quickly look at 1-point estimating, right? This is not an accurate way of doing estimation, right? And can lead to a lot of problems. And in fact, because you're using this method, it could be quite abusive, okay? So the estimator submits one estimate per activity. The estimator uses expert judgment, estimator uses historical information, and so basically the estimator is using a best guesstimate scenario. This is horrendously dangerous, and we should try to avoid it as much as possible. Then there is what is referred to as analogous estimating. This is a technique that uses expert judgment and is heavily reliant on historical information for duration and cost. It is a top-down method that is used for cost for estimation. It is not accurate, and it could also be problematic and abusive. So let's be cautious about using analogous estimation. There is what is referred to as a 3-point estimating, and this is typically used when we have moments or elements of uncertainty. And so for cost and duration estimate, what can be done is that one could construct an approximate probability distribution which represents outcome and future events based on the information that we have. So there is what is referred to as the beta distribution, and this is given by a formula P plus 4M plus O divided by 6, where P is your most pessimistic response or your most pessimistic estimate. M is the most likely estimate based on your judgment. O is your most optimistic. You add them all together after multiplying the most likely by 4 and divide by 6. Now you can plot a graph and you will get a curve looking something somewhat like this, where this colored line represents the beta distribution, with this point here being your optimistic, and this point here along this axis being your pessimistic, and your most likely will fall somewhere here. So this is your beta distribution. However, if you notice, there is also what could be termed as a calculated expected estimate, right? TE, and this is what is referred to as the PERT, using PERT analysis. And on the next slide, so just take a mental picture of this, because on the next slide, I will then elucidate what PERT is. So you may have heard about, so I'm gonna get, so as I said, just take a mental picture of this, because I'm gonna get to it, not in the next slide, but the other. You may have heard about parametric estimating. So that's another technique that uses the relationships between variables to calculate cost and the duration. Now, the important thing in using parametric estimating is that the measurements must be scalable to assure accuracy. For this particular estimating method, historical information is used, and it is also a form of extracting measurements based on some units. So once you get for example, the cost per square unit or the hours per installation, you extrapolate under the parametric estimating technique. There is also what is known as regression analysis that is used in parametric estimating. Now, regression analysis employs the scatter diagram technique. There is also heuristics that is used. A heuristic is it's just a highfalutin term to describe that which is generally accepted as a rule or a best practice. For example, we may have heard about the Pareto principle or the 80-20 rule that generally is an application of heuristics, right? Let us now go to the PERT, as I said. So we had a graph looking somewhat similar to this, where we had the beta distribution, where we had the optimistic, the most likely, and the pessimistic values being used and plotted. So essentially, these are our probability indices plotted against man hours. All right. Now, what is PERT? PERT is an acronym. So it's the Project Evaluation and Review Technique that was developed by the US military to aid in their project management. So it's a planning tool that is used to calculate the amount of time with some amount of accuracy that it will take to realistically finish an activity or a product. Now, what is interesting about PERT is that it employs the same technique as was described earlier, utilizing the formula that I shared with you when we looked at the 3-point estimating technique. So if you observe, it is your beta distribution formula that is being used to do the calculation for determining the most likely, but this is by way of calculation. So this is a guesstimate. This one is calculated using a formula table. So your text makes reference of PERT as an estimating technique. So it is important that you understand the genesis of it. To continue with parametric estimating, we made mention earlier of regression analysis, and I spoke of regression analysis being a scattered diagram type of understanding. So here it is that let's say we wanted to determine the relationship between ads and revenue, and so we plot a graph, and you could get a scatter diagram, but at the end of the day, what you do is want to find the most appropriate straight line through that mass of data, and that line will be used to aid in your regression analysis. So we talk about the application of heuristics, right? So here is a scenario where algorithms, for example, will be or is being compared against heuristic evaluation. So heuristics is going to consider all of these elements, all of these different factors that are feeding into the decision-making process. And at some point, a decision is going to be made based on those factors that are considered to be of most importance at that point in time. And I used an example before where I said when we speak of heuristics, we're talking about, as an example, the 80-20 rule, right? So just think of that application. When is it that we want to apply such a rule? When is it that we want to look at what obtains, irrespective of all the information that we have? We are not always guided by what the information is saying. We are not always guided by what the data is saying. There could be compelling data pointing us into a particular direction. And in all likelihood, one will say, okay, if we're totally driven by data, this is what we would do. But then one could take the decision and say, no, we won't do that, but we will do this otherwise. Why? Because there is something else that is more compelling, that is maybe seen as best practice, though the data is not promoting that, or something that could be impacting an individual at a point in time. And rather than being driven by data, you're saying, oh, but you know that I'm going to take a decision concerning this aspect of the project, but the person who is managing this lost their father a short while ago, so they're going through stress. So rather than being driven by the data and the principle of project management in totality, you are now driven by some emotional element in the decision making. And so that will be considered as heuristic evaluation. So I hope everybody understands. We're looking at, when we're comparing that with an algorithm, the decision with respect to what happens on this side is going to be fundamentally driven by the analysis that was done, any experiment involved, any design features, and the environment for implementation. So no heuristic is considered here. And this side, it is strictly driven by the facts as they're presented. Now, having said that, we are going to look at bottom-up estimating in a little bit more detail when we look at cost estimation. But just in a general sense, bottom-up estimating is a method of estimating project duration or cost by aggregating the estimates of the lower level component of the WBS. So remember when we looked at the WBS and we had our work packages, the work packages having comprised of activities, and we costed the activities. Then when we cost the activities, the cost of, for example, these 3 activities down here, 10, 20, and 25,000, let us say that's the cost to execute these 3 activities. When you add them all up, then that comes to 55. So this particular work package has only 1 activity in it, right? Let's just assume when you add up these 2, you get a control account of $105,000. Then there's another control account here that sums up to 200. When you add them both, you have an estimate. Well, not dollars, let's say hours. You have an estimate of the amount of hours that it will take. So when an activity duration cannot be estimated with a reasonable degree of confidence, the work within the activity is decomposed into more detail. We learned that when we did the WBS. So it uses information from the WBS and a thorough listing of the project activities. And remember, we said that this or all of these activities will now be done in your WBS dictionary. The bottom-up estimating method is your most accurate of all the estimating methods. So if we were to look at the accuracy scale in estimating methods, and we plot a graph of accuracy versus fact. When we make expert judgment, there's a lot of perception that is involved. So that is kind of your quick and dirty type of estimation. Your 3-point estimate is a little bit more accurate because you're using some formulation, but again, there's a lot of subjectivity in it. So very little facts for your 3-point estimate, and your accuracy will not be high. When you do comparative estimate, that is like getting 3 quotations. You are at a point where, based on what your contractors are saying, it's a little bit more factual, but it's not as accurate as you would want it to be, but well enough. Parametric estimating, that is by using PERT, etc., gives you a lot more information, or use a lot more information that is factual into this type of cost estimating, and it is reasonably well accurate. However, your bottom-up estimating requires a lot more detail, and much of what is inputted in the process is factual. And so that's why it is your most accurate type of estimating, bottom-up estimating. You will see questions relating to the different types of cost estimating methods and the accuracy. Please pay particular attention to them. Now let's move to 6.5, which is develop schedule. And it's a process of analyzing activity sequences, duration, resources, requirements, and schedule constraints to create a schedule model for project execution and for monitoring and controlling. So essentially, it is in this process that the project schedule is created, and there's a determination as to how long the project will take. It creates the schedule baseline, and remember that your schedule baseline is the approved schedule. So we have a lot of inputs into the developed schedule, And what we use is we do a schedule network, and that is by way of the precedence diagramming method that we described just now. And so we analyze that network when we are done with it. We use the critical path method to assist in certain determinations of duration and for those activities that we can't play around with, meaning if they are delayed, your project will run into a problem. We also use resource optimization as a tool, some amount of data analysis. We engage in applying to our advantage the leads and lags that are on activities. And of course, we can use some schedule compression methods or techniques to assist us in pulling back or getting back on track if we are running into problems. All right. Now, the outputs are many, but of course, we get our schedule baseline and the schedule, the project schedule, the schedule data, the various calendars, and the documents, updates, etc., etc. Please, as soon as you finish your test, pay some attention to these things. Use a textbook to assist you in getting greater detail in preparation for test number 2. So you will not be getting any of this on test today, but you need to know this information very well for the upcoming test number 2. So let us look at the critical path method. The critical path method is used to estimate the minimum project duration, and it determines the amount of schedule flexibility on the logical network paths within the schedule model. So basically what it does for us, it determines the earliest time by which the project can be completed. So that is what your critical path does. It also shows the longest path through the network diagram with no slack or float. So it shows the longest path through the network diagram with no slack or float. And what is a slack or float? A slack is the amount of time an activity can be delayed without delaying a succeeding activity or without delaying the project finish date. There's a third component I would like to add to a slack or float. A slack is the amount of time that an activity can be delayed without placing it on the critical path. So if the activity has slack, that means it is not on the critical path because there's no activity on the critical path that has a slack. So if you have an activity and you delay the activity utilizing all of the time that is referred to as slack on that activity, you're asking for trouble. So you have to be very, very careful when it comes down to that. I will show you when we get to the diagram. So let us imagine that this is a network diagram, very simple network diagram, and I need for us to familiarize ourselves with these cells. Okay. So when we get let me get my pencil up. When we get information, so we could get information to generate a network diagram. So you're given the information and it says activity A will take 5 days. So this represents the duration that the project will take. Reference will be made to an early start. How early can you start the project, right? And how early can you finish? If you start on day 1 and it takes 5 days to do it, then obviously the earliest time that you will finish will be 5 days. And the early finish, if you notice, look at your legend down here or your key. So this A represents your activity name, okay? And then if I start late, this being the first, I'm making an assumption, okay, this is my late start, which is day 1, and for this particular activity, my late finish is going to be 5. I'm going to show you later on how you can generate these numbers yourself. For activity B, this is activity B, the duration is 5 days. For activity B, let me go back to the activity B. It has a float. You notice a float of 5 days. So total float, in some literature you will see slack. It has a total float of 5 days. What this is suggesting is that you can wait 5 days, or if you waited 5 days before implementing activity B, we wouldn't delay the successor activity, which is activity D, which cannot be completed until activity B is completed. But you don't want to do that, because if you use up your 5 days of float or 5 days of slack, what will happen is that you may very well put activity B on the critical path. You do not want to put any of your activities on the critical path, because what it does, it means that if you are delayed, any activity on your critical path that is delayed, your entire project is going to be delayed by that amount of days. So these zeros that you're looking at here, and I'm going to show you how you get these zeros. These zeros are suggesting that you have no slack, no float, and so that means that they sit on the critical path of your project, so you cannot play around with these activities. I am not going to go through with any detail as to how to do this today, because it takes some time. So I'm going to stop here today. I'm going to stop here today. I'm going to stop here today, and we will continue next class, starting from the critical path, so we can spend some more time so persons can better understand. And so you have a little more time. You have a little more time to now go and refresh yourselves, because you have a test starting at 9:45, and if my memory serves me right, it is 50 questions to be done in 75 minutes. So please take your time, read the questions, ensure that you understand them, and you should be okay. There isn't a lot of calculation in these tests. You have much more time than you need. As I said, you have, I do not think you need more than an hour to do the test, but I've put 75 minutes for those persons who may read slow and interpret slow. So please pay attention to the questions, and don't jump to put the first answer you see. What you need is a best answer. You could see scenarios where a lot of the answers or elements of the answers appear to be correct, but there's always a best answer. So spend the time, read the questions, assess them, and you should all be fine. Any questions? We're going to continue. We're going to spend, so for those persons who are accustomed to turn up late, it is extremely important that for our next class, you turn up on time at 8 o'clock to ensure that you understand what I am going to take you through. For example, I'm just going to quickly show you, because I'm positive I have a slide here. Okay, I think I have it at the end of the session. So this is an exercise that we should go through. Critical path, okay. Critical path. For example, So this is an exercise. So you are given something like this, a network, and you have to generate. You have to generate the critical path. You have to generate the network diagram and the critical path. But that is for next week. Okay? So please ensure that you turn up on time so we are able to go through with confidence, starting at the critical path, starting at 6.5. Okay? Any questions?
Yes, sir.
Sir. Yes,
Go
sir.
ahead.
First question, sir. Why did you have to make the multiple choice when you do one? If you pass, you can't go back to it.
I didn't get that.
Sir, for the exam, the test that we have at 9:45, it says that it's in the format that if you skip a question, you cannot go back to it. Why is it like that?
Why? Because
Yes.
you are not in a proper exam situation. The environment you are in, because you can consult the environment in which, because you can use your textbook. So there's no point me telling you don't use your
Sir,
textbook. Don't
sir, I
consult.
appreciate on that, sir. But one thing though, sir, just like how COVID bring forth changes, I saw certain things that for just go on, sir. Because at the end of the day, you might have do that for say, yeah, stop certain things, but suppose my internet go bad now, just like how we in a class while ago, your internet go bad. You understand? what I'm saying?
If it goes bad, if anywhere that you stop, when you restart, that's where you will restart.
Okay, sir. But at the end of the day, me say, all right. So you, sir, you never do something yet, and right as you get a question or something, it not come to you at the time, but you don't have time to sit down there upon that question. So you just move on and come back. Me see what was hard in that to make we allow for
Yeah,
that.
right. And that's the main reason. If you notice, just now what I said to you, spend time on the questions. And that's why I gave you 30 minutes additional than you require.
Sir, I'm not asking name, but sir, you always do it, sir. You always say the test is easy, and then the test is not easy.
Who's speaking? Is this Jace that's speaking?
Yes, sir.
No, man. No, you made a very important point earlier that with COVID,
Yes, sir.
there are changes.
Yes.
And change, just like you expect changes, so do I. Let me just explain something to everyone. The last thing that you want to do is to leave UTech with someone looking, are you looking over your shoulder, or someone saying you left with a diminished degree. Because of COVID, things were not properly done. Tests were made easier, this and that. There may be some truth to it, but at least ensure that whatever you're doing has some credibility to it. So you can walk with your head held high and said, I did my work. I did a test. If I get 60%, perhaps I could have gotten 70 under different conditions. If I got 80%, perhaps I could have gotten 90 under different conditions. Let it not be said that you got 70% when it's really 25 you should have gotten. Let it not be said. So the point I'm trying to make is that there has to be some system to help to preserve the credibility of the examination process. So you, Jace, might decide that you are studying. I asked a question when I just started the class. Where did we stop last time? Did we do this? Did we do? People couldn't answer the question. Yet they are supposed to be doing a test at 9:45. That means they didn't even review what we did last class, which will be a part of the test. So you might be an individual that might be seeing it one way. There are other persons who don't give a hoot.
Okay, sir.
You understand?
Yes, sir. I get the point.
Yeah, man, it is important that we understand that you might be thinking consciously that you want knowledge. There are many persons who don't want knowledge. Them just want to pass. And at the end of the day, when you go out there, you must be able to stand tall and proud and say, I did what I was supposed to do. Whether it's a C, a B, or an A I got.
Sir, I
And
want to ask.
part of my job is to help to preserve the credibility of the examination process. All right.
Sir,
So let me just say this. Don't believe I am not aware of what some students are doing on tests and exam. Students have been honest and tell me. So I know what is being done out there for people to pass. That's why some people don't need to study. They find means and ways of going around the system. But I tell you something, at the end of the day, I have an engineer. I have an engineer that I had to send home in December in COVID. Why? I think he was one of those students. He didn't get it in school. And even he's eloquent and he interviews well. But you know what? He's not getting it in the field either. Because the tactics that he used to go through the university is the tactics he wants to use in the field. And you know what? People will die. When an engineer or a doctor don't do their jobs well, people die. So the engineer must focus and learn his craft so that when he goes out there, he does well.
All right.
sir,
Right. All right?
sir.
Yes, sir. All right.
Go ahead.
So questions, would we be able to see the grades after the test is finished? Immediately
I
after?
think so. Yeah, normally the grades are reflected at the end. Yeah.
Sir.
Mm-hmm.
I was just asking, sir, how does one make provisions to do the PMI exam, sir?
Were you in my first class, Trevon?
Yes, sir.
Then why you ask me the question? Because we discussed that then. We discussed that then. But I'm going to invite you to go onto the PMI website. It is all there.
Okay.
All right. Somebody told me that they are now allowing for online examination. I don't know how true it is, so I don't want to speak to it. I haven't read it up as yet, but somebody told me that recently.
All right, sir. I'll check it out.
So read back lecture number 1. A lot of the information is on the first few slides of lecture number 1. I've stated that there. And lecture number 1 is posted on Moodle. And in addition to that, visit the PMI website and go under the certification/examination tab and a lot of information. All right? All right, folks. You have 12 minutes to go. So go refresh yourselves and get a comfortable environment. You know, the internet is unpredictable because I think that's what happened to me this morning. But what I've done, I have given some extra time just in the event you have glitches. And just bear in mind that the test is set in such a way that wherever you are, even if you get bumped up, it automatically saves it. So you don't need to go back from where you were. All right?
Sir, how much is test value again?
What do you mean?
Towards the final grade.
20%. Again, go back to lecture 1. All of this is contained in lecture number 1. The first few slides have all of this outlined. All right?
Yes, sir. Just and then instead of go to the slide, I still don't ask you that one question. Then.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Have a blessed day. And I'm not going to tell you good luck. Luck is not what you need for a test, but knowledge. So go and display your knowledge. Please think about the questions. And for those of us, if there are any ethics questions, because remember that the questions, no, you won't all get the same questions. For example, for the fundamentals of project management, I have 100 questions online, and you might get only 20, 25 questions from that area. On let's say communications management, there may be 60 questions that I have in the data bank. You may get only 5 questions. So the person.
Sir, this doesn't sound like something easy, sir. This sounds like something where I got my morning. Yeah.
That's what makes it easy. Because remember, you studied in Jace.
Yes,
right?
sir, that is true. But remember, not a computer, you know, sir. We have all a maths test later on, you know.
I tell you something. You're better than the computer. You're better than the computer. Trust me.
All right. Respect.
Many instances. No, sometimes we don't recognize it. Right? We are sometimes better than the computer with a lot of things. Right? So in an event, the point I'm making is this, that the questions are random. So you could, even before sitting in a room, and question number 5 on the same topic is 4 different questions. The point I'm making is this, there are some questions of ethics. And many Jamaicans, we like to think the Jamaican culture, Bandoloism. Please, when you get a question, think about it. And if it has to do anything with ethics and behavior, please do not think like the average Jamaican. You're going to get the question wrong. Okay? Think about doing the right thing. Think about what the global space demands of us. If you are working in a project with international partners in the international sphere, think about what will be required of you. And don't think Jamaican. If you do, you will get some of the questions wrong. Okay? I'll give you all the tips I can.
All right, sir. Respect.
Everybody? Good, good.